So, you've had some nice afternoon tea, cakes, sitting in a nice comfortable garden out in the countryside, wander around, look at the ponds, the trees, the fruit, the beehives. Yeah? But now the afternoon takes a dark turn. You have to listen to me. And I'm here with the ghost stories. I mean, the reason most of us, or certainly anyone outside of Clacton, has heard about Treasure Holt is the ghost stories. I've found claims online that it's one of the most haunted properties in the country, but more commonly there seems to be an agreement that it's one of the most haunted houses in Essex. So certainly the part of the country that matters to us, this is one of the most haunted buildings. You can see it's old, it's obviously very old. It is listed. The current buildings are grade 2 listed by English Heritage, or I forget the name of the listing people. I went on their website to check the dates, and they are saying it's listed as an early 17th century farmhouse, and it says as part of the listing that it's said locally to date from 1639. But there are stories of habitations on this site right back to the 12th century. So we know that parts of this house could be 400 years old, but potentially there's stuff underneath and in the environs that relate to people living here for up to 900 years. Long time, a lot of history. So it's not surprising that after all those years, there's a sort of build-up of stories linking this house to the history of Essex, to the history of the wider country. And some of those tales over the years have become quite dark. And that's where the ghosts, the hauntings come in as well. Those who are interested in these things say that a ghost is a restless spirit. So it's somebody who's passed in difficult circumstances, in bad, dark ways. And unfortunately, although it's a lovely house, and I'm told it's a lovely place to live, and has very good feelings, it does have a deep, dark past. There are lots of stories in there. So where have I got these stories from? I've done most of my research on the internet. I've found general bits of information, some of which contradicts other bits. It's not all clear cut, it's confused. But quite a lot. There was a book written in 1993 by a local man called Wesley H. Downs. It's called The Terrible Treasure Holt Story.
Yes.
And that has some of the key tales of this place. I've seen a copy today, but I couldn't get a copy to do my research. But I found a podcast online by someone called Peter Laws. And Peter Laws used as his main source that book by Wesley Downs. So many of my stories come from that. Other than that, a major source of information was the visit of the television team from Most Haunted. They came here in 2002. So we've been talking today about their visit, because of course Charlie, who was here at the time, partner of, I'm so bad with names. Pam, sorry. Yep. Wife, yep. So Charlie appears on screen telling some of the stories, telling how right from the time you first bought the house in the early 70s, you were aware of something going on. And one of the stories he told was putting your daughter to bed in one of the back rooms up there, and then seeing a girl walking around, thinking that she was sleepwalking. But she wasn't. She was still tucked up, safe and sound. This was somebody else or something else walking that way. And then more sightings, not just in the house, but out in the garden as well. And not just recently, there are sightings dating back decades before Charlie and Pam came here. So we have longer stories, a longer history. So we've got this 400 years from the building of this current farmhouse. 1639, I say, is the date it's supposed to have been first built. Well, 1639 is an important year. It's the start of the wars of the British Crown. It's like the wars in England, Scotland and Wales around ownership of the land and what's going on. So a very, very troubled time. Most importantly for England, of course, the Civil War, said to last from 1642 to 1651. So that's just shortly after the current buildings were erected. So not surprisingly, we have Civil War stories. Stories of a Roundhead and a Cavalier still carrying on their skirmish in ghostly form somewhere out at the front here, and also stories of a Cavalier inside the house, I think upstairs on the landing. I think that's where Derek Acora in Most Haunted met up with him. So we've got the Civil War generally, but more importantly, as with so many houses in the country of this age, Charles I came here. I don't believe he went to every house that he's claimed to have stopped in. He didn't live long enough, his life was cut short, wasn't it? But he possibly did stay here. Why not? Let's believe it, because he did have to travel the country quite quickly and sleep in a lot of different houses because he was on the run. So he came here with a group of his own cavaliers, his own royalist soldiers, and they were being hunted, followed as well as they could by the Roundheads, the parliamentarian forces. One of the main stories which pops up in Downs then is about the sighting of a monk called Simon. And where does Simon come from and how does he fit into this? Nobody's been able to trace the historical figure. We don't know exactly who he is. But the story is that he came here at the time that Charles I was hiding here, and he came to find Charles to give him a warning that the Roundheads knew where he was. He had to get out, get away. So he came here to give the warning. He came from a local monastery. They say he travelled 5 or 6 miles. So that puts it at sort of possibly St. Osoph Priory, but we don't know. There are no records. So he came here to give a warning to Charles I, which apparently he did. This was successful. He carried out that part of his business. But him being a pious man, he had heard about an evil couple. At that time, the house wasn't a farmhouse. It was being run as an inn. So it offered lodgings to travellers and drinks to anyone that might happen to pass this way. Well, he had heard of evil goings on and the some bad character of the man and woman, the innkeeper and his wife. In fact, she was reputed to be a witch. But the worst thing about them, possibly, I mean, you might think witchcraft is the worst thing, but a number of travellers would come past, not so many. It was a remote location in that time, just rutted dirt tracks. There wasn't a major sort of stagecoach route or anything. It's not a coaching inn, just a bit of a wayside inn. But there were travellers, people would come to stay, and it's said that if a wealthy merchant came to stay, they were very keen to offer him a good hearty meal, and some of their drinks, they were known for brewing strong ale, good ale. Also, they're associated with smugglers, so they would have had a ready supply of the Dutch gin coming in illicitly. So they would say to these travellers, oh, there's no one around at the moment, you know, there'll be people coming by later. Have a drink on us, drink on the house, have some ale, have a gin after your dinner. And not surprisingly, the travellers, the merchants would feel a bit tired, get a bit drowsy, and this kind couple running the inn would then say, well, why don't you go upstairs, take a bed in our best room, you can lay your head down for a while, have a bit of a rest. Not surprisingly, they were asleep in a matter of minutes, fast asleep, having been dosed with these strong spirits and strong ale. And whilst asleep, the couple would sneak in and rob them, take their purse, take nearly all their money. Now, if they slept through this, if they slept through and got robbed, they were the lucky ones. In the morning, they would wake up, thick head, not remembering much about the night before, and say, where's my purse? I should have more than that. Where's all my money gone? Go to the old couple and say, oh well, you were quite drunk, and you got a bit, a bit thooty, and we wanted something with the missus, so we agreed a price, and off you went. And so that's where your money's gone. You know, you paid for services rendered. That's the way it is. Okay, they'd lost money. They could dream about a good time they possibly had or didn't, because they couldn't remember anyway. We know they didn't, but that was that. But the poor souls who woke up whilst they were being robbed, who weren't fast enough asleep, who hadn't had enough to drink, they were dealt with differently. The innkeeper kept a big cudgel, a big club, and he was happy to use it on them. Either they'd be knocked unconscious, or they might be killed with the clubbing. Either way, there was a trapdoor in the floor upstairs. They were let down through the trapdoor, a trapdoor on the ground floor as well, and that trapdoor going straight down into the well, and that's where they were disposed of. So the monk Simon, he thought, I can do something about this, you know, I can talk to these people, get them to mend their ways, see how we can make things safer for travellers. But you know, he was sat there the night, and they offered him some drink, and he said, oh well, I'll take some ale, and he drank some of the strong ale. But then they persuaded him maybe to have a touch of the Geneva or some of the wine that they had on hand, and he ended up quite drunk. So they let him stay the night, but he was a monk, he didn't have any money, he had nothing worth stealing, so they didn't bother him, they left him alone. In the morning, tried to give him breakfast, but he wasn't really up to eating, he wasn't feeling like it. Poor chap was a little bit unwell for some reason. So they promised him that they had a herbal cure, a way of fixing this. But this herbal cure, he had to hold his nose, pinch his nose, and drink it in a single draught. So I suspect it was more like a hair of the dog. It was the stuff from the night before. They got him drunk again. And although he was there trying to get them to mend their ways, in fact, they talked him into staying longer, and he started to become friendly with them. And they even talked him into waiting there for the meeting of a local group they were having the next week. This group was the witches, or some people say it's witchcraft, others say they're actual devil worshippers. But the two tend to become a bit mixed, and people can't always easily distinguish between what is what. You know, witchcraft being a sort of the Christian religion, whereas devil worship is something a bit stronger and of a different nature. So we're not sure of the rights and wrongs of this, but the story is that Simon stayed, and he waited for this, and he went out. So there'd be, I don't know, somewhere in the grounds here, they'd have a bonfire, and they'd set the fire, and dancing around, drinking, carousing, whatever they got up to at such events. I'm not going to say it was necessarily an orgy, but you can imagine that if you want. But so Simon not only accepted what was going on, he sort of got a bit caught up in it. He was enjoying it. And legend has it that he jumped up on a fallen tree trunk, started waving and shouting, and said that he renounced God and he would worship the devil from now on in. So here he is, the monk turned devil worshipper. He stayed on at the inn. He was still not just involved in this, but he knew what the couple were up to, and he was basically allowing things to go on. But then one night they're drinking, they're with a French smuggler, a guy by the name of de Courcy. And they were talking about the monastery and the treasures that the monastery held. And Simon said, well, I've still got a key to the side gate, you know, we could nip down there sometime. And so they hatched this plot, and they actually went off and robbed or stole from the monastery some of their plates, some of their silverware, maybe some gold, maybe some coin that they got salted away. And they brought all these goodies back, with the idea being that they would hide them, I haven't mentioned it yet, but tunnels under the property. They would hide this loot in the tunnels, and then de Courcy would take it off to France at some stage and sell it on the continent, where people wouldn't recognise what it was, and it would be easier to dispose of. But they got quite into this idea. They'd enjoyed doing it once, so unfortunately some of the local churches weren't safe from their further nighttime exploits. They took more goods, and people were starting to wonder what was going on. They were looking for this gang robbing churches. And at the time, there was a sort of handyman who lived in the barn or shed stables out at the back of the house, and this was above one of the entrances to the tunnels. His name, if I can find it, Matthew. Sounds like he was a bit of a simple character. He said he was quite small. He wore clothes several times too large for him, several sizes too large, and one of those big stovepipe hats. So we've got this physical description of what he looked like, but he was sort of half asleep up in the loft of the stables one evening when this group of smugglers, innkeepers and former monk came in with some spoils from a local church, talking about what they'd done, taking the stuff down into the tunnels. So he then found out what was going on. When next they went out, he decided to rescue this stuff because he wanted to take it back to the churches. He would just keep a box of coin for himself, a little bit of tax, a little gift, something for his trouble. So he got up some of the treasure and hid it back in the house, ready to take it to the church. But at the same time, the house was attacked by a mob who had worked out what was going on. He fled. Matthew ran out through the garden, fleeing for his life, but they chased him, throwing stones. Stone hit him, he fell down, and he was beaten to death. And this is possibly one of the figures that's been seen in the house at times, carrying a box. So this may be the box of gold of treasure. Looking at my notes, they didn't have a happy life, any of this lot, really. The innkeeper's wife was killed a few years later, it says, in an argument with more Roundheads seeking after Charles I. So they're looking for him again, but he went around to different parts of the country. He goes somewhere where it's safe, and somewhere else, then back again. So this thing did happen. They were backwards and forwards for a few years. But Simon the monk carried on with his ways, still drinking heavily, up to no good, bit of devil worship on the side and whatnot. and it's at this time that stories come in of human sacrifice. Never been any proof of this, but these are the sort of stories that get added on to existing tales. It's said that travellers passing by when one of their sort of debauches was going on heard screams, possibly the screams of young children, and they rushed in to see what was going on, came on to the land, and they captured Simon, and he was killed. This story, I seem to have different stories here. I told you these things become confused, didn't I? In this one story, I've got Simon being killed by these travellers going past, and they kill him by pushing his face into human remains and suffocating him. I've got another story, and this goes back to the smuggler de Courcy, the French smuggler. Now, one of the things that was quite valuable at the time, it's horrible, the bodies of the deceased. People made medicine and charms out of old bodies. So there's the possibility of some of the tunnels from here going towards the churchyard and then bringing in bodies from there. But there's also a story of de Courcy bringing in an embalmed body, a mummified body, and extra embalming fluids, bringing those in on his ship and through the smuggler's routes. So these embalming fluids could be used to keep the body parts from the churchyard usable, saleable for a longer period. But unfortunately, this was in about 1665. What event do we know of 65, 66? This is the Great Plague, the bubonic plague. And for this tale, either the body or the fluids brought in by de Courcy actually bring bubonic plague as well. So we have the plague story here at Treasure Holt also, And Simon, in this story, becomes ill with plague, and he dies screaming and asking God's forgiveness and renouncing the devil somewhere on the track to the house, so somewhere out the front here. So we've got two stories there, but he didn't come to a happy end anyway. The house was then empty for a time, but after the innkeeper and his wife were gone, Simon had gone, but local landowners and farmers did report difficulties with crops failing and also terrible fetid smells coming off their land. So that is the most terrible story, that episode here at Treasure Holt. But there are other figures that are seen. We've already mentioned the little girl in the bedroom upstairs. Basically, it's got nearly every ghost you could possibly want in a haunted house in England. The only thing you haven't got is a headless horseman. There is apparently, though, a horsewoman who rides along the lane at the front there. I'm told she's got long blonde hair. I couldn't find a report of how she's dressed. If we're closer to Coventry, I'd say it was Lady Godiva going past. So we have that. We have the Roundhead and the Cavaliers. We have the monk or the cowled figure going around, and the little girl upstairs there. And there's even a photograph which seems to show a face at that top window there, which is said to possibly be the face of the little girl there. And I think when Most Haunted came, Derek Acora, the medium with Most Haunted, I'm not going to say too much. A few years later, he was discredited. It seems that he found his stories elsewhere, and it wasn't always his spirit guide, Sam. What's that, Sam? What's that? Oh, you say there was a headless horseman at Treasure Holt? Well, you know. But anyway, he also saw a little boy, and when he saw the little boy, he described a sort of rash and swelling on his face and things. So it seemed like a child who died probably of scarlet fever, which would have been quite a common thing in childhood through into the 19th century, definitely, even into the early 20th century. There was a lot of infant mortality. But another figure that's quite interesting is Percy. Now, Charlie knew about Percy, didn't he? Because Percy would come in through a sort of part of the wall or a window that isn't actually a doorway, but it used to be a doorway. And I think Percy was on his way back home from the pub, and maybe in his cups a bit, and sort of stumbling upstairs and things. But to find out more about this character coming into his house, Charlie, I'm told, contacted local historians, who then, one of them put an account in one of the local newspapers of this male figure, a big guy with a beard and things, but definitely didn't mention the colour of his beard. But this report went in the newspaper, and then a woman who lived locally got in touch. She lived up by the Stour, Constable country, I suppose, somewhere around Dedham or Flatford, somewhere around there. And she said, "Oh, that's my Uncle Percy." Anyone could say it's their Uncle Percy, couldn't they? But she described him exactly, and described the fact that he had a big red beard, very, very red, and that is the distinguishing feature. Now, Charlie knew that he had a red beard, but it wasn't in the newspaper report, apparently, so it seems that this woman was right. And in fact, there was a Percy Hayward lived in the house from 1917 and through into the 1920s, certainly, so he lived there quite a time. Now, when Derek Acora came with the Most Haunted team, he was actually taken over. Percy spoke through him, and he was stomping around in the room there, and Yvette Fielding, who hosts the show, she was trying to tell him he's dead. "I'm not dead." Silly. This is Derek Acora. quite a showman. It looked like quite fun anyway. But I'll mention Percy again in a couple of minutes maybe. But the other main figure that's seen is a lady in a crinoline dress, seen in the bedrooms. You all know what I mean by crinoline dress. It's that sort of big sort of mid-Victorian, mid-19th century dress that comes out. Initially it was a sort of horsehair fibre, hence the name crinoline. It comes from horsehair and linen. But later on it was sort of undergarments which were made with hooped steel held together by straps and the big dress over it. So this would be a sort of late 19th century figure, the crinoline lady. And that's very much another of those classic sort of ghosts, isn't it? So apart from these sightings, what do we have to support any of these ideas? Well, there have been findings inside the house at various times. I mean, the well has been found under the floor and I think is now blocked off with a stone or concrete slab, but under the floorboards was the access to the well. And in the 1920s, there was some work done on the ground floor of the house, and a lot of the flooring was dug up and a number of items were found under the floor. And I found contemporary newspaper reports from 1928. The first of these, strangely enough, is from the Belfast Telegraph. So obviously Treasure Holt's fame has spread not just across England or Great Britain, but all the way to Northern Ireland as well. So here we are, grim discovery in old house. While restoring an old house, Treasure Holt, on the outskirts of Clacton-on-Sea, Mr. and Mrs. P.S. Hayward, so this is Percy living there in 1928, he's doing the restoration. Mr. and Mrs. P.S. Hayward, the owners, found under the floor of a living room human bones in unslaked lime and charcoal. So if the bones are in lime, the lime is put there to help them to break down, but also to cover some of the smell as they rot away. So it's a way of disposing of a body when you don't want other people to know. So here we are, unslaked lime and charcoal. With them were a shoe buckle and a token dated 1793 with the wording John Wilkins, Ironmaster. So we're looking at a later date here. We're now into the late 18th century. So Mr. and Mrs. Hayward speak of mysterious knockings on the front door, generally when anything of a festive character is taking place. So you wonder, Mr. and Mrs. Hayward, something of a festive character taking place, and then they hear the knockings. We don't know, do we? So, to carry on. Mrs. Hayward and her daughter Iris allege that they have seen in the grounds a figure dressed in velvet with knee breeches and buckle shoes, and heard sounds of horses' hooves on the cobbled yard at dead of night. The local belief is that John Wilkins surprised a party of smugglers making merry, and that he was murdered and his body buried beneath the floor. So that's the Belfast Telegraph. Here's the Chelmsford Chronicles. We're a bit closer now. During the reflooring of the room at Treasure Holt, Great Clacton, the residence of Mr. and Mrs. P.S. Hayward, a quantity of human bones, old coins, etc. were discovered. The articles found included a shoe buckle, a token with the date 1793, pieces of a clay pipe, and some petrified tobacco. Don't know what it was scared of, but there we go. Also a piece of an old flagon. A party of Roundheads is said to have halted at Treasure Holt on its way to destroy Little Holland Hall. We were talking about Little Holland earlier, weren't we? Little Holland Hall and Chapel. Tradition also has it that a cavalier was killed in a fight there. This is all one paragraph from the same newspaper. Somehow they jumped from 1793 and they go back more than 100 years to Cavaliers and Roundheads. It's no wonder people have difficulty with history when you get that printed in a newspaper. But there we are. So certainly in the 1920s there were stories of hauntings as well. So since we mentioned smugglers, there's not smugglers, no. I was going to mention another trope of ghost stories, the highwayman. There was apparently a highwayman who used to take shelter sometimes at the inn here because they would sort of allow him to go out and do his evil deeds. But again, locals got wind of it and they came in a mob, took him out and hung him from a tree. Apparently it's not here any longer, so I don't know exactly where it was, but some tree near a corner of the house, and the ghost was sometimes seen hanging there, the ghost of the highwayman. Fortunately, since the tree was chopped down, it's no longer seen, so you don't have to worry about that one. Just Percy sounds fun though. You're all right with Percy, aren't you? So that's a few of the tales from Treasure Holt. I'm sure there have been more tales going around. You might know some more stories, but I think that's enough for now. It sounds, it has a good claim to being the most haunted house in Essex.
I wonder where the buckles and the coins went to.
I haven't seen anything saying that.
Because that'd be interesting to...
I mean, they might have given it to one of the local museums. Yeah, it's possibly something to look into. Yes, yeah. But then 1928 might have done nothing with it. People had a different relationship to the past 100 years ago. We tend to these days, anything old, we think it's something special. But I suppose it was different then. Yeah. But you do live in a house with some fantastic stories around it. I'm glad it's happy though. I'm glad these spirits aren't up to no good. You know, they were bad enough in their lifetimes. They're all right now.
Have you ever had any sort of funny experiences here? It's always been just friendly and benign.
Not what she's thinking. No, it's Simon's more
Receptive.
yeah, I'm not a believer, but I love that. I live here. We love the house, absolutely love the house.
I can't find anything bad about the house in recent years. There are these horrendous stories from the past, but those are the sort of stories that become attached to most old houses anyway. Some of them will have a basis in truth, but will be exaggerated. Others may...
But like you said with Derek and Cora, he was not believable. He was,
So, what's that, Derek? What did you say?
That's it.
I'm just channeling Derek. He says, how very dare you? Because unfortunately Derek himself has passed and gone on to the spirit world now, hasn't he?
But they say to Derek, like, they don't tell him where he's going, and they say, just get on a train and come to Clacton. But it's very easy to Google, and he was very much to the book, so, yeah.
He also comes out with the standard sort of stories. I mean, he spoke about a woman who he described only as the Countess, and she had a rosary and she was showing him the cross, and she came from the mid sort of 17th century. So this is the time of the dissolution of the monasteries after Henry VIII set himself up as defender of the faith and then started persecuting Catholics in the country. So he sort of came out with that story, but in fact, of course, that was 100 years before the present building was here. If you believe in these things, it doesn't mean there isn't a spirit from an earlier time, though.
That's it. But no, it does make you wonder if there is something there, doesn't it? You know,
Certainly lots of history, anyway. Lots of history. It's been lovely to come here today and see the place close up.
That was very lovely, that was. You were very good.
Well, it was worth it to get the tea and cakes.
Are you staying for more? Would you like more tea and coffee?
No.
Do you have any? They've just asked the